soon as I started telling her about you and the shakedown thing, she immediately went, while she was sitting in the car with me, I'm talking about my cousin, by the way, immediately went to YouTube and found you, found the shakedown, and started listening to the Ben David episode. I'm like, please don't listen to that while you're sitting in the car with me.
That's awesome. Well, all right. Well, let's get started with this. I got everything recording, so I'll do the open, and then just so you know, when I say Malone, that means I'm handing it over to you to do your opening. So
my opening again. I don't have an opening.
You make up your opening. It's whatever you want to make it.
No, you're the host of the show. You're supposed to introduce people.
Gosh. All right.
I don't have some giant boom microphone in my face sitting in a studio.
You could. If you were in Colorado, you could.
No, I couldn't. Oh, well, if I was in Colorado.
Yes, if you were in Colorado. All right. Welcome.
You might be. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, forgive me.
Yes. All right. Welcome to another episode of The Shakedown. I am your host with the boom microphone in front of his face, Ryan, aka Rainforest. I am a podcast host. I am a writer / artist and comic book purveyor, and and also spent 6 years in prison in Texas. And I'm here with my co-host, who spent a little bit more time than me in prison. And
who does not have a boom microphone.
Who is a far superior artist.
Microphone in my face.
No, he has no microphone in his face. All right, but he could if he was up here in Colorado, but he refuses. But anyway, he is an artist / writer, and also comic book purveyor. This is Malone.
Hi. And I was also in prison.
For a little bit.
For a long time. Yeah. How did you survive 6 years in prison, Rainforest?
Well, comic books and books, books, and making good friends like you. That's what kept me alive.
Aww.
So, anyway, I have a topic for tonight that has come up. It came up a few times today, and I really wanted to talk about it. And I did not prep Malone at all. As you can see, he's nice and relaxed and not ready for any exciting topics. So this should be interesting. But the question I wanted to get into today, what is a criminal? And what brought this up today, and has been kind of bringing this up in the past week or so, is as many people may have heard, there was a shooting in Uvalde, Texas, and anytime there's
pronounced Uvalde.
Uvalde. All right. So, but that's not the thing that keeps on coming up in the news. Of course, that's not what people want to talk about. They want to talk about guns, because that's where this topic immediately goes to, and the same topics get kicked over and over again. And one of the biggest things that always comes up is, well, we need to, felons can't have guns. And one thing that Malone actually said in a previous episode is that whenever something happens at the prison, whenever a mistake was made, the prison had a tendency to do something that did not solve the problem. They just acted, and it had nothing to do with solving the problem. And like in this instance, they want to take guns from felons, but the person who acted did not have a criminal record, at least not as far as I'm I have heard, and I don't, and in many of the other mass shooting instances, the big mass shooting instances, the person does not have a criminal record. So I wanted to talk about that today. What is a criminal, and what does that mean, and what should we do about it? Is there anything we can do about that? So, yeah, like I said,
what's the basic definition of a criminal then? I mean, if you were to look it up in the dictionary or whatever, what would you find?
I did look it up.
A picture of you, first and foremost.
Right. It's a picture of me.
And right next to it, a description of the disgusting deviant that you are.
Right. It says Ryan Forbes, criminal. But after that first initial definition, it says someone who commits a crime or break some sort of, it's either a felony, commits a felony or a misdemeanor action, but it's basically someone who breaks a law as it is written. That is the definition of a criminal. So,
right.
The thing I want to point out about that is,
does it put in that definition? Does it say and got caught?
No.
Leave that part out. Does it just say even if you didn't get caught, are you still a criminal? Or what if you got caught but you didn't get convicted? Are you still a criminal?
Yeah. So no. It doesn't talk about whether you get caught or not. It just says if you did it, you are a criminal. And honestly, when I hear people talk about it in general too, they aren't talking about people who get caught. They are talking about a specific type of person. Like especially when it comes to these shootings, they're talking about a type of person who commits crimes. You're
saying that the technical definition of criminal that you'd read in the dictionary is not what they're talking about. They're talking about someone who has some kind of lifestyle of criminal behavior.
Oh, I mean,
not the occasional criminal, not the one criminal or the guy that did it once or something and didn't get caught and will never do it again. But it's someone who's like is some kind of extreme criminal or something, or maybe there's a level or something to it.
Right. They're looking for some kind of they're not looking really, no one, when they're talking about it and in the dictionary definition, there's no level. There's no petty criminal and major felon. We're talking criminal versus we're talking one person is criminal. You cross a line and the person who crosses that line lives that criminal lifestyle, basically.
So it's a scarlet letter you can't get rid of type of thing.
I think
permanent.
I would say, especially the way that people talk about it is there are people who are born as criminals who come out with this criminal, even though by definition you can't commit a crime until you have to do something to commit a crime. But I feel like the way that many people talk about it, you're born a criminal. There's certain people who are born criminals and either need to be locked up or killed. And that's the bottom line.
Yeah, I get where you're going with this. As if criminals are a separate species of creature that are not human, of course.
Right.
And don't deserve and need to be dealt with. Some kind of invasive species like feral hogs that must be eradicated.
And
can't be fixed, can't be changed.
Right.
It can only be annihilated or at the very least locked up forever.
Right. And if you go even just by the dictionary definition of it, a criminal is someone who has to do something to become a criminal. So all of this stuff, all this talk about we need to make gun legislations based off of criminals. Well, they already did something. The person who became the person who had the guns in Texas and in Buffalo, New York, and all these different places, they became criminals after their big act. Having laws against criminals having guns or felons having guns, that would not have prevented anything. So lumping criminals in on any sort of prevention plan, you can't do that, because by definition, saying we won't allow criminals to do X will not prevent things, period, because they've already done something to become a criminal.
Will not prevent things.
Right. We won't let criminals own guns. So you haven't prevented the person from breaking the law. They've already broken the law to become a criminal. So,
right.
And the mass shooter.
Are you saying so? Since they're already criminals and they have that kind of mentality, well, then they wouldn't have any problem breaking the law again to get guns.
Well,
if they so choose.
Yes,
they're already criminals. Why?
Yeah, there's that aspect as well. But I'm talking more of we keep bring the conversation about prevention keeps talking about as we both know, upon our release, we have a whole bunch of restrictions. We can't own firearms. We can't be using firearms. We can't be hanging around people with firearms. We can't travel to certain places. We can't travel to certain countries. All of these things, okay? There's all these limitations.
Can't get an apartment. Can't
get
do all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Right. All of this stuff.
Jobs don't want you.
Right. This is once again, none of this prevented the initial crime. None of it. All right. Is it preventing a crime in the future?
Future crime.
Yeah. You want to try and prevent a future crime. Maybe not. Okay. What we do know is that the people who were doing the mass shootings, for the most part, they weren't criminals before the mass shooting. That's why they could purchase the guns legally.
Right.
So they get it. So everything is done by the books up until they do the criminal thing. And even then, I can't even say, they get a shooter in custody. He's still technically not a criminal because he has to be tried and found guilty, which a lot of people forget. That's all part of it. And that can take years, especially in a big giant case with a mass shooter who's very well known.
Well, don't you think that, maybe this criminal thing is just, are you suggesting that they're just looking in the wrong direction? They should be looking at the mentally ill? They should change the term that they're using from criminal to insane person. And then they would have hit the right mark?
No.
I mean, technically, if you're diagnosed as some kind of with some kind of mental illness, well, then you're in a category that should be there are certain things that have to be done. I mean, that could render you dangerous to yourself, dangerous to others.
Absolutely. But once again, look at what if someone is ill, then our first thought is if someone has cancer, are we worried about their gun rights at the moment that they have cancer? Is that really our first priority? Is the oncologist going to say, okay, I'm just letting you know you have pancreatic cancer, you have 6 months to live. I just need to know, do you have any guns in the house? Is that a conversation that's happening right now?
No, but I mean, come on, that's taking it to
It's not.
Anyone with pancreatic cancer, it has nothing to do with that type of thing.
Well,
there are people that are mentally ill. I mean, I would suggest that probably anybody that goes and does a mass shooting could be argued that there's a mental illness behind that would cause it.
Well, let me take you down what the actual conversation for someone who might have. I can't say I don't have pancreatic cancer. I do have family members who've been diagnosed with cancer and many other illnesses, and I can tell you how the conversation for them it usually goes down like this: you've just been diagnosed with cancer. All right, and here are a list of resources for you. I'm going, and this is the situation. This is what you have to deal with. These are people who can help. These are people who can help you in this area. These are people who can help you with counseling, with personal development. These are people who can help you with your treatment, who can actually directly deal with your cancer on what you're going to deal with that. There's a bunch of different groups that can help you in that area. All right. Even if they can't cure the cancer. All right. They can't fix the thing.
Right.
The problem they have a team, they have groups of people that can say, we're going to help you with this. Now, if you're mentally ill, that conversation doesn't happen, period. All right.
Really? Like mentally ill.
Well, if you're, I guess that's not true. I guess you can't, there's going to be certain situations, but if we're talking about right now in this specific
the whole reason why people are sent to asylums or to mental hospitals and all that is because of that. I mean, that conversation does happen.
Yeah.
People will say that, look, someone has become dangerously mentally ill and needs some kind of a 24-hour supervision and medication, or maybe even more extreme. I mean, it does happen, and because of the danger to themselves and to others that they pose. So, I mean, it does happen.
I will, but
it's just a lack of being able. I mean, in my opinion, it's an inability to be able to identify and do anything about that type of thing. But quite possibly, all we're talking about is, I mean, I get where you're going. That the focus on criminality is not where you need to be looking whenever a mass shooting happens. The focus needs to be on our ability to identify people who are mentally ill,
right,
and have this kind of danger and be able to deal with it. I'm saying that I don't know if that's where you're going, but you're saying I know what you're saying. You're saying that the focus is in the wrong place. I mean, I then added, possibly the right place for the focus is the mentally ill and identification of their problems.
I see, and I hear you on that. And the other part of what I'm saying is that one of the other things that gets thrown about too during these conversations is talk about mentally ill, which, and if it was talking about the mentally ill in the way that you're talking about is how do we identify who's mentally ill? How do we help them out? We actually will work towards prevention. Like, how do we recognize who's struggling and how can we help them? Then I'm all for it. I'm all for figuring out ways to deal with that.
Another place I see where the debate should rest is possibly on, is this just one of those things that living in a free society, one of the dangers of freedom that we just must live with. I mean, you want freedom, you want to be able to do all this stuff, you want to have your own freedom. Well, then these are the risks. It comes with a price. Maybe that's what we're talking about here. Maybe that is the other side of the argument.
Freedom, you have to look at it from two ends, and this is the problem that people run into.
What you're suggesting also, even whenever you get into the mental illness thing, is that you strip somebody of some of their freedoms. That And I think that's one of the reasons why we have such a problem with identifying these people, is because we so respect the idea of well, we can't tell people what to do. It's difficult to impose any kind of rules on someone who hasn't done something yet. But it's not difficult for society to point out, oh, that guy has done something. Let's hate him forever. And every time we need to impose a rule, let's not look at the real problem.
Right.
Let's look at that separate species of creature over there, the demonic criminal, and we'll force all that down his throat because he's an easy target anyways. We can do whatever the hell we want to with him.
Right.
Another unpopular figure, another unpopular subsect of society that's easy to pick on. Happens all the time, even with our big fancy vaunted Constitution. We constantly have these unpopular minorities of people that we will strip all those rights away from in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I mean and the point I'd like to make on that is that when it comes to freedom, no one can be entirely free in any society. Because if I'm entirely free, then I can just do whatever I want, period. That's freedom. That's also anarchy. That means that I can do whatever, and I can run around and
this is correct. But what you're suggesting is you're saying freedom at the expense of other people's freedom.
Right. So it's always a balancing act.
That our freedoms, the way that it's been designed or it's been thought of is that, okay, well, the only freedoms that we shall restrict for you are the freedoms that would restrict the freedoms of others, so that everybody's the most amount of freedom can be enjoyed by everybody. So, supposedly what it's supposed to be.
Right.
Or supposedly how I see it, at least. And of course, I mean, people lose sight of that all the time in the United States of America and decide that, well, we think that because we're this religion, that you should be too, or at least you should follow this particular part of our religion because we think that that's a really great thing, and because we take it so seriously, we think you should too.
Right.
And they'll restrict your religion, your freedoms behind something like that, or we think this is unhealthy. And we don't really care what you think because we know better than you, and so we're going to strip your freedom to smoke in a bar or a restaurant because we think it's unhealthy to smoke inside. That type of thing.
Right.
There's lots of, little places where we see those freedoms we see freedom being rescinded on a mass scale because a majority of people are dominating over a minority of people with their votes. I thought that the Constitution was supposed to be designed in such a way that minorities' rights would not be trampled by majorities being able to vote. That's what the Constitution's there for. So that when we all go to the ballot box, we can't vote in things that would strip some other group that doesn't have as many people in it of their rights.
Well, actually, with the Constitution,
it hasn't played out like that quietly.
Yeah, kind of the Constitution and the a lot of the way the original things like the Electoral College. It wasn't so much that they were set up to ensure the rights of all minorities. They were ensured to set up the rights of a certain very specific minority that to ensure, because the founding fathers knew that the rich, well-read, mostly slave-owning class was a very small portion of America at its founding. And one of their big fears was that someone could go and rile up all the landowners, other landowners or men or whatever, anyone who had the right to vote, get them all stirred up and have them turn on all those people who gathered and wrote the initial laws and set it up. So they had a little fail-safe, which is why we have things like the Electoral College and certain and like having judges serve life terms and things like that.
Right.
So we have made progress. We did have founding fathers that did believe that, every 20 years we needed a new constitution because literally Jefferson believed that we needed to tear up the Constitution every 20 years and then write a whole new one because he figured it's not going to be representative of the people of the time. It's not fair for the old generation to write the rules for the next generation.
Right. Because the world belongs to the living.
Right.
And so it's our destiny should be within our own hands. Yeah. It's an interesting concept, though. I like it.
I think it's a great concept, but on the flip side, you have people like, or people like in the same school as Anthony Scalia who believe that the Constitution is the Constitution and you should never change it. And it's written in steel, but, as long as it meets a certain interpretation, though, as always.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do get it that some people have appended to this document some kind of level of sacredness, which I don't really understand because I see it being violated constantly. But
right.
All right. Oh well. As long as it's violated in the way that appeals to them, well then, yeah, the Constitution should be sacred.
Right. So,
but I kind of like what Malcolm X had to say about stuff like that. No freedoms or rights can be given to you. Only freedoms and rights that anybody has are the ones that they take, ones that they actually enforce upon, enforce themselves.
Right. And that, I mean,
if I'm dependent on someone who has power over me to give me, to be so kind as to allow me to live my life with freedom, well, then I really don't have that freedom because they can take it from me anytime they really want.
Right. Is
that going at all down the track that you were hoping to go tonight?
I think it's a good track to go down, but I want to bring it back onto the rails of the track that we were getting on, and maybe kind of start going, maybe getting to some final points. But I want to talk. One thing I want to say about the criminal, back on to what is a criminal and who is a criminal, is that a criminal is anyone who commits a crime or breaks the law in any way, breaks any of any law. So, and because you can be a criminal for felony or misdemeanor alike. And so most everyone is going to count as a criminal under that definition. So,
right.
So if that's...
So you have to ask yourself, what do they really mean when they say criminal?
Right. And who are they talking about? And what? Right. And why are we so fixated on laws that are about handling criminals? Basically, because we're talking about taking guns away from criminals. If you're someone who speeds on the way to work, then you are, by definition, a criminal. If you're someone who cheats on your taxes, then you're a criminal. And none of you should be allowed to have guns. All right. If you're embezzling money, you shouldn't be allowed to have have guns. If you're the guy who, caused the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, you should not be allowed to have a gun based on these laws and these rules. Now, the crimes have nothing to do with guns, but that's what what these rules are for, and they're supposedly set to enforce things. The same thing goes.
Yeah, but of course, I get exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
But, so, well, I mean, that doesn't really solve. What you're saying is that they're imposing some kind of broad blanket rule over casting this net over whatever over this problem that doesn't actually solve a problem, or that doesn't even over a problem that's not even being addressed, so to speak.
Right.
Wow, that's not.
Well, I mean, what I'm trying to say is that you said it earlier best. It's we're assuming when these laws and these conversations come up that criminals are a different species. Criminals are someone different. They are a law-breaking type being. Period. They want to. Right.
They're advocating shooting people on sight that they think are committing a crime because
right.
It will reduce their recidivism rate to 0.
Yes, that is something. Yeah, that is great, and it's
because they're a separate species of creature like feral hogs that need to be eradicated.
Right, the criminal type people, we should, and that is a whole nother thing. If you are someone who advocates that the cops should shoot someone when whether or not they're
not just the cops, everybody. Which is why you have incidents just like that guy and those 2 guys in Alabama who took it upon themselves, or was it Georgia? It was Georgia. Those 2 guys in Georgia who see a black guy running through their neighborhood and take it upon themselves to go chase this guy down with guns, and then when the guy fights back and tries to take the weapon from one of them, they end up shooting him to death in the street. And now they're in prison, of course, but I mean, and that guy's lost his life because they took that concept that you're talking about into their own hands. And instead of the debate going into this area of racism and so forth, also, which I'm not saying that's completely invalid, but I don't think that's where the debate is most appropriately placed. It's this concept of taking of this criminal type of thing into their own hands, and that there's this separate species of creature called criminal that makes it all right for you to go and kill them. It wasn't. I don't think they thought they could kill this guy because he was black. I think they thought they could kill this guy because they thought he was a criminal. I mean, maybe because he was black, hated it. Maybe they that gave them. Maybe there was another reason, but I don't think that was the core of the reason. I don't think that's what gave them permission to go in their own minds to go and do this. Remember, you got to remember, one of those guys was a former police officer, and they claimed they were trying to do a citizen's arrest. They had cameras and everything.
This has become very common.
But you'll never hear that debate or that reasoning given in the media. They immediately go to some other some cause inside of their minds that they think is more important than that. They'll never, because I mean they can't even conceive of the other of the true root of the cause. The debate has never been had. It's not in the public square of opinion or whatever.
Which is why we have this podcast, because we never hear that.
We're here to change the world because we know what's really going on. We've got it figured out.
I'm not going to go that far, but I will say it's just I don't care. Honestly, I don't think a lot of times it's a matter of about the color. I understand it impacts some groups more than others for many different reasons. But I think this whole idea of a criminal is extremely problematic. And that is the problem. Like the fact that we can just label someone as a criminal, and then we're allowed to do whatever we want with them. We can shoot them in the head if we think they're committing a crime. We can lock them up and just forget about them for years on end.
Can enslave them and house them without air conditioning and 110-degree temperatures.
In states like Delaware and probably soon in Texas, they're not allowed to receive mail, like physical mail anymore. So
I'm thinking, there's other places too, I think, that have done that.
Yeah, Delaware has completely banned it. They can't do it anymore. Texas came really close while we were in there, and I think is really on the verge of doing
I think
it.
they will too, but they've given them. I think that's one of the reasons why they're allowing them tablets now.
Right. Which the tablets isn't still the the tablets are not a great substitution, and I can only imagine on that front. And the tablets are like what maybe at 5 units at all of TDC's over 100 units.
Oh, they'll get there eventually. It's kind of like the phone thing. It took TDC 100 years to get phones in there, and then they trickled in over the course of God knows how long before they finally got to all the corners of TDC. But they eventually got there.
Yeah, and Securus made sure to take advantage for a long time until just recent, until the Supreme Court finally made them drop the phone prices down. 24 cents a minute doesn't sound like a lot, but I will tell you that adds up real quick when that's your only way to talk to your loved ones is 24 cents a minute.
Oh yeah.
I mean this right here, I can only imagine like how much if we were running 24 cents a minute.
Well, they were just. I can remember those days when they first started too, and they had like 5-minute phone calls. And you were only allowed to make two phone calls a week or something. It was this ridiculous restrictions they had on it, and then they like found out how much money there was to be made, and like take all those restrictions, get all that off, man. Let everybody make as many phone calls as they possibly can for as long as they want.
That's another thing is like, they still restricted though. It's not like it's unrestricted access to the phones.
I mean, it went to 30. Yeah, it is technically because I mean 30 minutes, but they could. The only thing that stops you from calling back again is the eventual rack time cutoff that they had on the phone. That the phones went off at 10 o'clock at night and didn't come on until 6 in the morning or 7 or whenever it was.
Well, I'll put it to you this way. All right. If there were half as many phones as there were inmates in each pod or cell or whatever in each day room, do you think do you think there would be more calls?
Yeah.
There'd be a lot more calls.
I think there'd be more. You're probably right. I don't know, though. That was also one of the odd things I found whenever they started bringing in phones. I would have assumed that everybody would have, immediately rushed to get themselves signed up for it. But there was a whole lot of people. There was a large number of people that just weren't interested in those phones at all.
There are a lot of people who are not interested, especially people with long sentences. And even people there's some people with really short sentences. They're not, or maybe not really short, but short sentences that don't want them either. And I understand that, but there on the flip side, that's one extreme. The other extreme was the guy that was in our pod who was on the phone from the time the phone opened to the time the phone shut down, and you'd have to tap on his shoulder to get him off the phone. Like that's the other extreme.
I know that you always had one or two of those guys on everywhere you go. Sometimes more, depends. And I agree with you, but I do think there would be more calls if you did have more phones.
So they
it does make one wonder why they don't put more phones in there.
Right.
I'm not really sure. It might be something to do with bandwidth or something else.
I'm sure there's probably a money aspect of it, but I have a feeling on any state-run agency, they're not smart about making money. They're just not. That's not usually a thing that they really think about. And there's so many chains of command and hoops to jump through. Unless someone high up, as you've seen many times, the only time something really gets done is if someone high up on the totem pole makes enough fuss, then it gets done right away. All of a sudden you find...
Well, there was a conflict when the phone thing happened, okay, between two different mindsets. One was the don't let those bastards even have air. I mean,
right.
we ought to be killing them. We ought to be, torturing them every day type of
Right.
attitude. And couldn't stand the idea of us being able to have a phone at all. Phones are too good for criminals type of idea, right? You had that. And it was competing against this whole other mindset that saw dollar signs on those phones. And I don't believe that they started doing it because they felt like they wanted us in contact with our families.
No.
I'm not really sure exactly what finally prompted them to decide to use phones. It might have been that they just finally felt like, I mean, every third world country on the planet allows access to the phones in their prisons, except, and here it is, Texas doesn't have phones in their prisons, and it is the 2000, and it's 2010. What is going on?
I will
There's internet in prison in Peru, and you don't have access to a phone in Texas. Everybody's still sitting around writing, using letters. And after I got out of prison, I mean, of course, you can't, just like you can't find a payphone anywhere anymore. I know it's not impossible, but finding stamps and things like that is not nearly as easy as it was. I mean, they're not to be had everywhere.
No.
You have to really go out of your way to try to get a hold of a stamp and envelopes and things like that, because people just don't write letters anymore. There's no need to out here. I mean, electronic communication is so accessible. It makes everything else, for the most part, obsolete.
Yes.
So I think that maybe TDC was running into that. They're looking at the near future of written correspondence and realizing it doesn't have one, and that people's families still want to communicate with their loved ones in prison.
But that I don't think that was. I'll put it to you this way. I don't think it's any surprise that Securus, and that they'll say it's. I know some of the phones said CenturyLink, but it was Securus. Securus is the one that runs all of the phones to all of the prisons, all of the country, and then it makes no surprise to me that they do all of them in Texas. And I am sure they had been pushing, like that is.
You'd say it was like an outside lobby that probably paid off some of these state senators and of course governor. Who was it at the time?
Perry
the governor. Perry,
yeah.
Exactly.
I think they had been pushing since day one to get into the market, and then I think finally there was some sort of give, and they
Perry was a lame duck at the time.
Yeah,
and that was what gave him he realized he wasn't going to be up for an election, so that's why he made those decisions, I think.
Right.
Because that was still a very unpopular call. People in Texas did not like the idea of us getting phones.
Right, and that's I will tell you, in pretty much every other respect, Texas takes that hard line that you talked about. These inmates don't need air. Like they don't need. We are happy to watch them work the fields all day and die in the fields, as opposed to giving them a fan. Like it's. Yeah, I mean that this is. They are fine letting inmates die, work in the field, they love that idea, the idea and the very real life image of guys in cowboy hats standing over inmates or the guys on horseback standing over inmates with a shotgun and telling them to work while the inmates are freaking just falling out in the field, battling freaking snakes and spiders and all sorts of other crap. Like Texans love it because criminals are bad. They're not human. They're bad.
Species of creatures.
Right.
They deserve torment.
Right. And it's not even about them learning because they don't believe in that either.
Oh, no.
They don't.
Because if it was about that, well, then your rights would be restored to you at the end of it all.
Right.
Oh, now you've learned your lesson. Welcome back into the fold of humanity. If that was the point of it, well, then, yeah, that would be the end result of it. But because the end result, there is no end to it ever. You are forever a criminal. And there's nothing that can be done about it.
Well, it's not
other than us constantly picking on you behind it, because now that you have that label of criminal, anytime that we get some evil bone in our body that decides we want to start doing something bad to someone, you will be the focus of it.
It's not the other thing is when we get out, we don't get not only do we not get our rights restored, we get a fast pass back. You just leaving your house at the wrong time, up until very recently.
You don't get your rights restored. You get your rights restricted. I mean, you other than the fact that you get out. I mean, it's with very, very limited amounts of freedom, especially for me with the GPS monitor.
Right.
I would love to see the statistics. We ought to do that one day. We need to look up the statistics of how many people actually make it on the monitor, because of course we both know the story of Boots. You were there.
Oh gosh, Boots! I forgot about Boots. Oh yeah,
Boots. The whole reason he was in prison is because he could not handle an ankle monitor. He's mentally ill. I mean, it's obvious when you talk to the guy for any stretch of time. He's not really a bad person. He's mentally ill. And they put this monitor on that he is not mentally equipped to handle.
Boots is a perfect example of if you gave him a productive task, if you could stay on top of him, if he was part of a community, and he was part of that Jewish community, when we took hold of him, when Jacobowitz was over his shoulder telling him what to do, Boots was on it. Boots would get it done. He was cleaning tables like nobody's business. But the second the second he just doesn't know what to do, he's going to do something stupid. And I'll tell you, Boots, I would hate it. I would personally hate that, to have someone over me like that. But Boots appreciated it. He understood what his situation was. And
he needed the guidance of someone else.
Right.
I think he realized that. Yeah.
But these are not things that we offer to people struggling. And we don't offer, there are so many positive things that could be done. Even Ben David, who as we have seen, he can get into all sorts of craziness. That energy can be put to positive things. He can sit there all night cleaning a piece of trash until it's a working laptop again. It's insane. It is insane.
Yeah.
So
you're absolutely right. I mean, I agree with you there. And but that's kind of off the subject. I mean, I brought up Boots and that kind of took us down a rabbit hole there. But what I was trying to say is I'd like to see just how many people have survived this ankle monitor thing all the way to its conclusion and gotten off of it, because it is quite onerous. And I think that whenever I got out, that they had actually pulled back on it a little bit from what I was told before that. People were required to not only give them a weekly schedule of where you were going to be, every single place you were going to, the exact location of where you're going to be at every hour of every day, but they also had to give them the route to which they were going to get there. So and if there was any deviation from that route, you were subject to being sent back to prison. And I mean, it doesn't take much imagination to figure that daily life oftentimes takes us off of our own beaten path.
Right.
I mean, there's mechanical failure of vehicles. There's there's just any number of things. There's a crash, there's detours, there's this, there's that, there's all sorts of stuff that happens in life. Life happens.
Right.
I mean, I've got another friend whose father was in prison for 30 years, and whenever he got out, he was on the ankle monitor. He's never been able to get off the ankle monitor. He's been out of prison for over 7 years. He's been on the ankle monitor, but he's been in and out, back and forth into jail, behind the monitor, and just he cannot handle it. He cannot handle it. And instead of getting him off of it, finding some way for him to handle it, I mean, they instead would rather have him on this endless cycle. He's not committing any more crimes, and probably never will. The man's old, first and foremost. Right. The guy's like in his late 60s or early 70s. He's way out of his criminal years or his wild years, and they don't even want to send him back to prison. I mean, he's violated this monitor so many times that if it was someone else, they would have sent him back to prison. But because he's so old, they'd rather not deal with him there. So what they do is they have him this endless cycle of halfway houses, jail, and safe P programs because he's mentally unequipped to be able to handle a GPS monitor.
Right. And that's one of the biggest determinants of criminal behavior
he's a
too.
Criminal.
Yeah, that's
a criminal, so that
no,
he deserves that.
that's one thing I always want to bring up when we have this conversation is that the biggest thing.
No restoration into society for this person.
Right. But the thing is that the biggest determinant of criminal behavior is not income, it's not education level, it's not race, it's not parents, none of that. When they've studied this, the biggest determinant of whether or not someone is going to commit is going to break any sort of law, the biggest indicator is age. And that's what happens when they say that this stuff works, prison, whenever they're arguing, whenever they just lock them up for an X amount of time or a really, really long sentence, they've usually aged out of it years before they were locked up or before they get out, I should say. And that's the biggest thing is that when you're in your 20s, when you're in your teens and 20s, that's when you're going to do the most, you're going to break the most laws is going to be during that time. As you get older, you get out of it.
Everybody knows, when you're young, you do stupid stuff.
Right. But we don't talk about that.
And you grow out of it as you get wiser and older. I mean, you don't need statistics or any of that for anybody to know that. That's just anybody that's had kids or has been a kid, which is every one of us, knows this.
But we don't talk about this whenever we talk about making a new law.
Well, you think you'd know it.
Yeah.
But apparently, somehow or another, that gets lost in this whole criminal thing.
Right. So anytime we have this law about criminals, just remember that. Everyone's done something stupid when they were a kid, and that's when these criminals
Some people do stuff that's
acting
extremely stupid, though.
Yes. It's just levels.
More stupid than others.
Right.
Right.
And you may think you wouldn't do something that stupid with your friends or whatever, but I promise it doesn't matter about income. It doesn't matter about race or whatever. Everyone does stupid stuff. And as Malone said at the beginning, just some of us get caught. Some of us get caught. Some of us get punished harder than others. Some of us do it in the wrong county. Some of us do it in the wrong state.
Some of us do it while being the wrong color.
Yes.
Some of us do it while having the wrong income level.
Yes. Well, not being able to get the right lawyer.
Exactly.
So that is the point of what we want to say. So before, I think my equipment is probably going to start, its battery life is about to die. So I think it's about time to wrap this up. And I'm going to try and put this up probably quickly. I think we can put this one pretty much right up. But anyway, I'm glad we got to talk about this. It made me feel a lot better. Any final words over there, Malone?
Yeah, I'm sure you do feel better, you criminal scum.
Yes, I do.
All right.
All right. Well, this has been this has been the Shakedown. Thank you for joining us. If you want a cool shirt like this, you can go to wayward.press or waywardpress.com and check them out. And you can also check out Warp Ranger and some cool comics and cool art and stuff like that too. And
Very cool.
And yes, and we will see you again soon. The Shakedown is recorded in luxurious Longmont Public Media Studios, and our theme song, Shakedown, is provided by Envato Elements.